Hi, it's Wednesday, July 5th, and I continue to read and wonder my way through Mark's Gospel. And I apologize, this is a little late today. I usually have everything up by noon, but it's the whole on vacation thing. Sorry. It just feels like early morning to me, although I realize it's noon as I'm recording this. Anyway, you don't need to know about that. What you need to know is today it's Mark 9:14 to 23. And yesterday we heard about the transfiguration, right? Jesus went up the mountain with Peter, James, and John as the witnesses to this transfiguration, whatever it might have been. And then they came back down the mountain and had a chat along the way, and I wondered and reflected on all of that stuff. And today, today here we are. It's Mark 9:14 to 23. When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe, and they ran forward to greet him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak, and whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." He answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. When the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out, "I believe. Help my unbelief." When Jesus saw the crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he was able to stand. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" He said to them, "This kind can come out only through prayer." So, a rather dramatic story, don't you think? Just the description of the young man. He can't speak. He dashes him down. He foams. He grinds his teeth. He becomes rigid. And lots of folks, me included, when you hear that description, you immediately think about somebody in the midst of an epileptic seizure. And I have known epileptics and people with epilepsy. I apologize. I've known people with epilepsy, and this is typical of some of the seizures that I have seen. Appreciating that epilepsy is a variety of different. It has a variety of different expressions and seizures and different ways that it affects people. But this one, boy oh boy, seems classic, and so lots of people jump right into, well, so here he's epileptic, and Jesus cures his epilepsy. Except that Mark, who writes this, doesn't know about epilepsy as a condition, right? So he's describing something. Now, when Jesus talks about it, he says that he cannot hear, he cannot speak, and we know about the convulsions, and he's been thrown into the fire, into the water, whether that's the demon doing that or whether that's the boy doing that himself, or whether we're not quite translating it properly and the parents have done that, just trying to hope to drive the spirit out. It's hard to know. What I think we do know is that this is a difficult exorcism, a difficult healing. I can say that they did practice exorcism before Jesus. The Jews at that time also did practice exorcism, and demons could be driven out. Usually there was a conversation with a demon, and a sense. I've read that that for them, if you could name the demon, if you knew the demon's name, you could have power over it and drive it out. This boy is mute. This demon's not speaking. There's no conversation here. You remember, we've had other demons that spoke to Jesus. Who are you? I am Legion. The demons said in an earlier story. Here, the demon doesn't speak, which for me it just emphasizes this is a very difficult demon. This is a big healing. This is not a small one. This is meant to be dramatic, and so Mark has added all the drama that he can. Now, whether this is based on an eyewitness account of somebody who might indeed have epilepsy, or whether this is Mark just making sure we understand that this is a absolutely dramatically the most difficult kind of demon possession possible. It doesn't speak. It convulses, it grinds teeth, it jumps in the fire, runs to the water, it does all the things. I don't really know. And I don't know that it matters so much. Whether, the drama that Mark is presenting is drama that Mark has created or drama that has been witnessed and shared with him. The thing is, this is a big deal. For me. This is a big deal. Now, see, the preacher in me is already trying to think of the sermon I'd get out of this. I've never preached this text. Not this text. Similar ones, perhaps. But as I'm thinking about it, I go back to the very beginning. And I find it intriguing. So, it says when Jesus and the others, they came to the disciples, so the other followers of Jesus, they saw a great crowd around them, the disciples, and there's a great crowd, and scribes are arguing with them. So there's a debate going on between the scribes and the disciples, right? And when the whole crowd saw him, they immediately were overcome with awe and ran to greet him. So it's the whole crowd, it's everybody. So again, there is something about the presence of Jesus. There is a charisma. There is something about him that people say, there he is. Now, yes, his fame had spread. I get it. But it just feels to me like, oh my gosh, there he is. And even if you've never seen him before, you just know. So they're drawn to Jesus. And he's looking at this. So what are you people arguing about? And then one person from the crowd speaks up and says, yeah, this is my son. And then along comes the description of a really difficult situation, right? I mean, that's what I think is important. It's a really difficult situation. And when Jesus says, you faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? I think maybe he laughs a little bit, sadly, but I don't think it's all a you faithless generation. I don't think he's calling them useless. He is exasperated, and he gets it. The same way that my kids would exasperate me when they were younger. It's like, I love them, but why don't they understand? You gotta empty your pockets before you put your jeans in the wash. That kind of stuff. Like, why don't you get this yet? So they don't get something. What is it? What is it that they're not getting? Well, for me, the scribes and the disciples are arguing. And I assume they're arguing about why they can't heal this person. The scribes are going to see, why can't you do this? Thought you guys could do this. Thought you had the power to heal. You've been healing. We've heard about you. You have the power of Jesus. You used to be able to do this. Why can't you do this? And they can't. And then they're arguing with the scribes. And I can imagine them saying to the scribes, well, then why don't you do it? Because scribes should be able to do this too. They do healings. And then they're arguing with each other about why can't you do it and why can't you? And so they're arguing. Meanwhile, there is somebody suffering. You faithless generation. That resonates with me because there are times that I have been in long, protracted discussions, meetings, sometimes arguments with people or with communities about trying to help somebody. And while that person or people are struggling and suffering, we'll still argue about, well, okay, but who's going to be in charge? Okay, like when it's all said and done, who is going to put their name on this effort? I mean, is this going to be, an Episcopalian effort, or is this going to be a United Church effort? Who cares? who cares? Are we going to do this in the name of this, or are we going to do this in the name of that? And under what authority? It's like, why are you arguing about that? There is somebody right now hurting. Why aren't we focusing on that? Instead of arguing amongst ourselves, why aren't we focusing on the situation? That to me is Jesus' exasperation. And I get it. And in 2023, there are a number of times that Jesus might... if Jesus were walking around with me, Jesus would be going like, oh, Norm, you faithless generation. Why aren't you getting this yet? Why are you still arguing about this? Why aren't you just getting it done? And I might argue back with Jesus, yes, but we have to set up systems and protocols, because this time I'll do it, but then someone else will go and want to follow my footsteps but not know how to do it because we haven't set it up, or somebody else will come and claim it and misuse it. And so, yes, I can always argue for a good bureaucracy. And there's a tension in that, and I think Jesus is just fed up with this. The thing is that they're not discussing a plan that they can't agree on. They are arguing with each other, and they're focused on each other and not on the actual need that's been presented. And that I do recognize, and that is where Jesus gets me every time. When I'm doing that, I am guilty. Absolutely. So, Jesus now gets involved. And the man, he asks the man some questions. And the man says it's been happening since he was a little kid. Gives him more descriptions. And he says, but if there's anything you can do, if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us. And Jesus says to him, if you are able. That is to say, it is a given that Jesus can do something about this. But it's not just about Jesus. It's also about the man. And it's about others. Now, from a theological point of view, from a Christological point of view, from a discussion about what Jesus' powers are, do I have the power and ability to thwart Jesus? If Jesus wants to do a thing, can I stop it? I don't believe that I can. I don't believe I can stop the will of God. Right? I might, I don't know, slow it down? I'm not sure. And this does make you sort of wonder. When Jesus says, no, if you are able. So is it the man's faith that's going to do this? Does Jesus not exercise some power, some ability, some control in this? Like, what if the man had faith, but Jesus didn't want to do it? Would it still happen beyond, even though it was against Jesus' will? Can you make Jesus heal just based on your faith, regardless of what Jesus wants to do? I struggle with that one. You can't rob Jesus of agency and power. That turns God into the Force from Star Wars. Celestial, eternal, spiritual power line that you can just tap into at the right time and get what you want, and you control it. But I believe that God exercises agency and control. So I don't think that this means that it is only up to the man's faith. But I do think that Jesus is including him. If you are able, because all things can be done for the one who believes. Can be done. Doesn't say will be done, must be done. Can be done. So yes, I want to do this, Jesus says, but I want you to want to do it too. And I love the man's answer. We hear this reply put in the words of another person in another gospel. It's a centurion, I think it's in Matthew's gospel, but it's like, I believe, help my unbelief. And I think the reason we hear it in this story, we hear the same thing said in a different story, is because whether or not the stories are true, that line is very important. I believe, help my unbelief. I consider myself a faithful person. I'm not done learning. I consider myself to be well versed in theology, and I have an appreciation for how God moves in my life and in the world, but I am not done learning. I have what I believe to be absolute faith in God. I trust in God, and yet there are moments when I feel the need to jump in and wrest control because maybe God doesn't quite get how this is supposed to work. So obviously I have moments when my unbelief rises up. I understand this, man, or at least I understand that sentence. I believe, help my unbelief. I love the power of it and the vulnerability of it. I love the truth of it. I do believe. I am a faithful person, but because I am faithful, I also have a level of humility that recognizes there are times that I lose track of my faith. There are just moments. I don't believe, for instance, in bargaining with God. I just don't. I believe my relationship with God is such that I talk to God, God talks to me. We listen to each other. I share with God what I'm hoping for, what I'm asking for, my aspirations. I share all that with God. I do pray for outcome, absolutely. But the idea of bargaining. So, well, God, if you will do this for me, then I promise that I will go to church every Sunday. I promise I will give $1 million to the, like that kind of thing. I don't believe in that. I absolutely do not. And anyone who wants to do that, I advise them against it. And we talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. I remember after my mother had her massive aneurysm and they wheeled her into the operating room and told us she was probably not going to come out. Oh my God, this is 30 years ago. When I had faith then too, I believe, yes, I was an ordained minister. I had my faith. But I also remember bargaining with God as she went in. God, if she'll be okay, that I will do this and I will do that and I will never do this again. I'll do that. I remember bargaining, that I was just pulling everything I could in because it seemed to me that in the moment my mother's fate rested on my shoulders, my ability to negotiate with what I would assume was an uncaring God, because you don't have to negotiate with a caring God, right? So I get that there are times when your faith, just in desperation, you let go of it because maybe you're wrong. I believe. Help my unbelief. Trust that God saw through what I was doing there and was not angry at me. Yes. And by the way, I mean, yes, my mother's outcome was good. But whatever the outcome would have been, that doesn't. No, it's not about bargaining. It's just about being with God in difficult times for me. Anyway, all of that. It's more than you need to know, but that is the, I believe, help me, my unbelief moment for me. So, Jesus heals him. Heals the boy, and the crowd, oh my God, he's dead. It's interesting, again, there's a drama in that. He's not moving at all. It's as if the demon was so much of him that having healed the boy, having removed the demon, initially it's almost like there's nothing left. He is exhausted and is recalibrating. What is it to not have a demon anymore? And I don't know, if you ever overcome an addiction or something that has weighed you've carried, it's weighed you down, something that you would call a demon. If you've ever freed yourself from that, there can be a definite sense of like, it's gone. A complete exhaustion that comes with having made it across the line. I can imagine this young man has been fighting with this demon for his whole life. And now you don't have to fight. You don't get up and dance a jig. You just lie there exhausted and feel the lack of the demon. I think it's important every now and again when we come through something to just stop and feel. I don't mean we have to lie, in corpse poses if it's yoga, but I do think it does sort of help just to take a moment and go, yeah, this is what it means not to be worrying about that anymore, not to be carrying that anymore. This is what it means. And in gratitude, just quietly embrace it. Now, I'm pretty sure that's not what Mark wants me to do with the story, but it's just that moment just means a thing to me. Maybe because it just tweaks a memory for me. I don't know. But the big thing, I think it comes at the end. The big part for me in this is, so why could we not cast it out, he said. And Jesus says, that kind can come out only through prayer. Is that a nice way of saying, you know what? Demons almost are never driven out. Healing never happens based on arguments. So what you were doing with the scribes was a complete and utter waste of time. That's why it didn't happen. Some people think that that's kind of what he's saying. I don't know. Could Jesus be that sarcastic? Yeah, could be. Passive-aggressive? Possibly. But I think that, again, this is a complete possession, right? This is, I really believe that's what Mark has given us. This is as big and extreme as it can possibly be. So this is the big one. And sometimes the only way to deal with the biggest of problems is to give to God. Is to recognize that this is not your battle alone anyway. This is not something you can argue with and find the solution to. This is the thing that you just have to give over to God and let go. And that's what Jesus knows. Maybe that's why he says to the man, if when he says, if you're able to help us, if you are able, meaning you, me, us, we give this to God. Or, in a sense, you give it to me, Jesus and God being one, but this idea that, sometimes you just have to say, no, I can't do this. Again, I'm flipping into like 12-step programs and that kind of recovery where we talk about, being powerless over our addiction and turning it over to a higher power. Again, that's not abdicating responsibility. That's saying, I don't have the capacity to deal with this on my own. I can't do it. I need help. I need God. And this is a big one, and I think that's why it's a big one, because what Jesus says there, some things, this kind can come out only through prayer. It's not your ritual of exorcism that's going to do it. Don't worry, you haven't failed. This is one you can't do. This is one where you actually have to let go and leave it with God. And again, I know there are some people say, yeah, you leave it with God because you don't want to take care of it. You're unwilling to try. You're unwilling to put yourself in the line. All that stuff. Yeah, I get that. That is the negative side of that, and that can happen. And I certainly have seen people do that. Go, we'll let God deal with that. Rather than dealing with poverty or homelessness or whatever the issue might be, racism, reconciliation, whatever it may be. We'll let God sort that out. And no, that's not the way it works. But when I look at something like, say, systemic racism, and I go, there's no way we can fix that. You see what's going on in the world? There's no way we can do this. It can't be done. I can't do it. I believe. Help me in my unbelief. I can't do it. But God can. God can help me do it. If I give this to God and work with God as opposed to asking God to work with me, then in fact, definitely, we can put an end to systemic racism. There is an end to homelessness. There is a way to deal with poverty and hatred and bringing extremes together. It is possible. Not if we think we can do it on our own, but if we give it to God and then follow God's lead on what we're supposed to do, then I think we can do it. And that's the piece that comes out of this passage for me. And that might be simply because of what's going on in the world right now. Maybe it is that I come to that conclusion. Because I don't know if I've ever thought that before when reading this passage. But that's what's jumping out for me right now. Why could we not cast it out? Well, this kind can only come out through prayer. Prayer is my talking to God. You got to give this one to God. I believe. Help me in my unbelief. I believe in God, but I'm not giving God everything. I'm going to keep doing this myself. No, I believe in God. Help me in my unbelief, God. Let me follow your lead. Yeah, that's how I'd preach it. Anyway, that's what it's saying to me right now. And I'm going to stop talking because I think I've talked enough. So, let me offer a prayer. Loving God, thank you. Thank you for being present in our wondering. Thank you for sparking our imagination and opening our hearts. Thank you for making us aware of your presence. God, help us trust in your presence more and more every day. And we might be even more open to you, willing to follow rather than asking you to simply help us. God, may our wondering today help us grow closer to you. We pray in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, through the Holy Spirit. Amen. That's enough for me today, but I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and we'll see what happens next. Until I get to see you, God bless. Please know that God loves you exactly as you are, the way you are. And please know that God's love moves through you into the world in amazing ways. You matter. You are changing the world a little bit at a time, and that's a great thing. God bless you. See you tomorrow.